Hi, I'm Rebecca Moore. I'm the chair of the Master Parks Planning Study Group, and this is the second public meeting that we've had, but it's certainly not the only input that we've had on the development of this plan. There's been a lot of output or outreach to the community through an online survey that I hope everyone had an opportunity to fill out. We've had a few meet and greets at the market on Thursday afternoon and on a first Friday. We've gone to the businesses to get their input. And I'm going to introduce you to Anita Nardone from Simone Collins, who is going to lead us tonight. And she's actually been leading this for us as the liaison to this project. And she can talk a little bit, and I think they're going to be giving a 35-minute presentation on where we are and open it up for public comment. So, Anita?
Thank you, Rebecca. It is a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for hosting us, Narberth Borough. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm the project manager, Anita Nardone. I'm a civil engineer, but our two principals, Sarah Leeper and Bill Collins, are here as well, who've worked real hard, and Michelle Armour, who's our project landscape architect. So this is actually our second time here in working with Narberth Borough. We were part of the 2022 Squaring the Circle project as well. So this project has really just been phenomenally fun for such a small area, right? The amount of interest and passion that we've uncovered through all of this has just been really gratifying. There's so much to be said about Narberth, and we listened as hard as we could. And hopefully what you'll see tonight is how we have progressed through the process. This is the second meeting, as Rebecca said, and we've entitled it The Refined Concepts. We had our first public meeting on May the 25th, and that was a brainstorming session. Many of you who might have remembered that, we threw up all kinds of ideas. What May 29th did was kick off the real hard work of 15 key person interviews, the public opinion survey, focus groups. Each part of the puzzle for Narberth just became clearer and clearer. And so what you're seeing tonight is a refinement of 6 preliminary concept plans that we shared. Everything is on the website for Narberth, that we shared with the committee, got their feedback, and took all of that public information that we had and came up with refined concepts, which we'll share with you. What we're not going to do tonight is spend a ton of time rehashing things that we did talk about at the public meeting, the analysis part. All of that is on the website, so you can go through and click through some of those meetings to see some of that. But that isn't to say that we will ignore any questions you have. Over here on the far wall, you'll see analysis maps, which basically inform, of course, the design. And over here, starting with the table, is where you'll see the refined concepts, which we'll discuss. Sarah will take us through that. So with that being said, let's get started. And I'll start with our first slide, our agenda. What I'm hoping to do tonight is to give you an update on that public participation project, what we found out. Again, there's so much to say. What I'm hoping to do is summarize it for you, what we heard you all say to us. The background of the project, the vision statement, which really set the tone for why we were all here in Narberth for this Master Parks plan. Then what we're going to do, 3, 4, and 5, is take each individual park, starting with Elm Grove, show you, remind you what those initial concepts were, and then take you through how we have refined the program and came up with the maps that we're going to see here on the presentation. I know I got to move back, I just realized that, sorry. What you see here and what you're going to see here up on the screen, right? So each of them, Elm Grove Park, Station Square number 4, and Narberth Park will be the ending part of our program this evening. What we'll then take are your questions and your comments, and I'll give you some specific directions when we get to that point. We're going to try to move through this presentation in 30 to 40 minutes, as little time as we can without rushing or omitting things, to give you all the opportunity to make the comments and ask the questions that you need to. So with that, then we'll go into the next steps and where we stand in the process, and what we're going to do after this meeting. What we'd like to do is really thank the committee. I have really never seen such a hardworking committee who really worked to get the word out, to involve everybody in the community, to be of assistance to us whenever we needed something. They were right there. That's a lot of time. I know you all volunteer on so many different things. We all know what a chunk of time and to have that kind of commitment to Narberth was really telling. So we thank everyone on the committee and Jeff as well. Jeff Alvin, appreciate it. The process, the master planning process. Many times we will look at these plans and think, oh, this is exactly what it's going to look like in 2 to 3 years, right? No, we're right at the beginning of the master planning process, right? Someone came up with an idea. The feedback we've gotten is that the concept of the parks here in Narberth are so important to everyone. What do we need to set a planning and guiding document to take us into the next 20 to 50 years? What should those parks look like? The master plan, that's what our final product is going to be. What does that entail, right? Collecting the site data and the site analysis, what you'll see over on these plans. You can't look and jump into the middle of a park, right, without knowing everything that's around it, what runs through it, what's underneath it, right? How you get there, where does the water flow? All of that is really important, just as important to a park as what you actually finally construct. We develop a site program. That's where you all came in. All of your ideas, all of your passions, all of your interests, what you care about most, great history about Narberth, all came into that. We developed the preliminary concepts. There was so much interest in this project that we had sort of a middle ground between the preliminary concepts and the draft plan. Going back to Rebecca's point, what we're going to come through with this process is a draft plan that won't be finalized until the Borough Council accepts it in January as a final plan. So we will always refer to it until that time as a draft plan. So where are we? We are at refined concepts. Preliminary concepts which have now been refined based on your feedback here tonight, based on our communications with the study committee, Rebecca and all of the other folk, we will refine that even further. There'll be a review period of 30 days where this plan will live on the website, and we will reach out to the stakeholders that gave us their information and ask for their comments again. The master plan approval is slated for the Borough Council in January. All of this schedule is available on the website. We're going to go through it right here. So here we are down here at the public meeting 2, refined concepts. The last 2 public meetings are the Narberth Planning Commission, where we have the draft plan, what we will recommend as the plan for the final approval by the Borough Council. And then, of course, the Borough Council meeting will be in the draft presentation December 5th, voting on it in January as a final. Public input update. This is one slide where I'm going to tell you that we were blown away by the input that we got on this plan. Many different ways that we sought it out. First was the committee, right? The study committee who knows this and loves this community more than anyone, or maybe not more than anyone, but certainly giving us direction. Public meetings, the public visioning survey, which all of you I know, based on the population here, is almost 1 in 5 who responded to that survey.
There's no audio on online. I just got a message saying there's no audio online.
Okay, we'll work on it. Thank you.
Just want to talk? Yeah, I'll talk so you can test it out. Great. Keep going. All right, we'll keep going. Thank you. Appreciate that. Survey, 15 key person interviews, 3 stakeholder meetings, and then, of course, lots of follow-up phone calls and emails that I've received as the project manager from people who had heard about it and were asking questions. Let's go back to the public visioning survey. 798 responses as of this morning, right? So almost a fifth of the population of Narberth responded. Now we know everyone who responded is not only a Narberth resident, right? But still, great interest. If you can see, we chose one question to try to represent a little bit about what people felt about your parks. What are your favorite type of park features? Natural habitat and passive recreation was number 1 at 73%. But look at how close the next 3 are. Athletic and active recreation, playgrounds, and community events are all grouped right around the 60 to 67% response rate. Historic buildings and facilities, and then other represent the rest of it. I have other ways that we kind of looked at it when people were asked what specifically needs improvement. I went through all of those responses and came up with 4 categories. One was connectability, access, shade trees, beautiful plantings. And that was number 1. Those comments related to those things represented about 40% of people's responses. The second was skate parks and tennis courts, which certainly caught people's attention over the past few months, right? Next, people were interested in how the parks are going to serve people with varying ages and interests and abilities, right? And the rest of them were others, right? Which talked about anything from, their specific needs, parking, lighting, noise, those kinds of things. But very specifically, people wanted to see upgrades to what we have in the parks and make them more accessible. The key person interviews, we had a great meeting with everyone involved in all the environmental areas of the borough, including Lower Merion Conservancy and the Shade Tree Commission, the Friends of Narberth History Business Association, the Civic Association, the Co-op Gardens. I'm stating these all just because I just know you can't quite see them from back there. The Cycling Club, New Horizons, all of our first responders, the Borough Engineer and Public Works, skate park users, Montgomery County Planning Commission, Delco Baseball and American Legion Baseball, and the borough staff. So we really heard a lot of great information from all of those folks. Now, a little bit about the project background and an update on where we are. The vision statement was crafted and recrafted by the committee. And what you can see here was a real strong desire for making these parks for all ages, all abilities, promoting safe pedestrian connectivity to them, embracing active living and how that can be accomplished in those parks, but also very much involved and interested in climate resiliency and the environmental aspects of the park. One thing that we want to say, the total of all of the parks, all 4 of them, the 3 we're studying, and Sabine Park is 8.32 acres of a borough that is 320 acres. And so all of your parks don't even quite represent 3%, right, of the land area within Narberth. And that's a really important concept, because when we start to talk about all of the things we'd like to see in those parks, we need to be understanding of how much space we actually have, right? But this interest came on very strongly, this last portion of the environmental and ecological resiliency. Right? That was a very important thing to the committee, and the more we listened, the more we heard about how everybody feels very much the same way. This is an amazing community who understands climate change and the resiliency for stormwater aspects and flooding, right? So that is a great vision statement. Here is our park system, right? The boundary around Narberth Borough and the 3 parks we are studying, and there's our slide, 8.32 acres. The 3 parks that we are, or 2, Narberth Park and Elm Grove, exist at, really, if you look at the elevation point, at the lowest point, right? East Indian Creek runs through, drains the entire borough. Our 2 parks of Elm Grove and Narberth are right there at the lowest point. And we certainly have heard the stories of the different flooding issues that we've had. Station Square a little bit up. Sabine is a little bit more graced with a little bit more elevation. The circulation, what a critical part of studying those parks. We heard loud and clear how people want to get to these parks safely. They want to get there without using a car. They would like to have accommodations for bicycle travel. It's really important to understand the traffic circulation, right? The parking situation, which is kind of the frame around the park. as important as I said before, everything in the park is, getting there safely and providing accommodations for ADA accessibility into the park equally important. Here's the 3 analysis that I encourage you to look at over here on the beginning part of our poster boards, so you can understand. The legends are there, so you'll see where we have everything mapped out from, vehicular directional movement, stormwater manholes, where the water actually is, floodplain, all of those things are on the analyses maps. And they informed our discussion and our decision-making about what could actually happen. So I'm going to turn this over now to start with a look at the refined plan. So Sarah will take you through, and we're going to go in this order: Elm Grove, Station Square, and we're going to leave Narberth Park. So thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Anita. Okay, so as we go through Elm Grove Park, we're going to kind of follow the same series of kind of information for each park. So just to kind of set the stage, just a few pictures to remind everybody kind of today how Elm Grove Park looks, Elm Grove Park. So, the township spent a lot of work on removing invasives from the area. Currently, it's in a lawn state because that's a very easy way to manage it and kind of keep invasives from coming back into the area where they did a lot of hard work. So in some ways, we kind of have an open slate to kind of re-envision what we want to see here. What we kind of heard from everybody through the whole process is that we really want to focus on ecology within our park system. So we kind of see Elm Grove as a place where you can really celebrate the ecological systems in and around Narberth, and kind of envision this as being a sister park to Narberth Park. So Narberth Park has a lot of active recreation. Elm Grove Park will serve more as kind of a passive recreation place with opportunity to just kind of explore ecological systems. So again, we did 2 initial concepts for Elm Grove Park. And this was really a way to kind of, with the public, through our stakeholder meetings and key person interviews, and also with the committee, to kind of explore program ideas for the park and kind of decide what we wanted to see in this park. So, this is a very small site. We're right around an acre and a quarter. And we do have the stream that runs through it. If you recall, this site was originally part of a larger parcel that was slated for development, and that is why the borough looked to preserve it. So the creek is actually the property line. Currently that creek is kind of culverted, which means it's walled in and has a concrete bottom to it that kind of channels water between the 2 properties. And then we have that open lawn that kind of comes up to Wynwood Ave. So what we're kind of looking at here were just ideas of how we might move through the site, what type of activities we wanted to see in the site. But the big idea we really started to explore here was, what happens if we start to naturalize that stream, relax the bank, let it function like a natural stream should, kind of similar to what you see further down in Shortridge Park or up in Norbrook Park, where they've done stream restoration along the East India Creek. So we got a lot of great feedback on these 2 concepts, and we'll kind of, based on that, we were able to further refine a program. So this is kind of the program that we've identified for Elm Grove Park, and we're looking at kind of 5 big buckets of how we explore ideas. One being connectivity improvements. So Anita talked a lot about how it's important, how do we get to the park? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about connectivity. So here a big idea is, how do we get people safely through that tunnel? And this is kind of, in this plan, we're going to look at baby steps of how we start to approach that, but there's bigger ideas that the borough can kind of move forward through some additional kind of traffic engineering studies that might make that tunnel a safer way for pedestrians to pass through. But today we're looking at the idea of just having a little more generous plaza on either side of the tunnel so that you kind of have a place to wait. You can see, okay, there's a bike coming through on the sidewalk that's only 2 feet wide. I'm going to wait here and let them pass, and then I'll go through. Moving towards the future, there might be ways where we can look at how the lights are timed. So maybe there is a pedestrian cycle where only pedestrians and bikers go through the tunnel, and you could have a more generous sidewalk. So those are things that we're going to look at more in detail in terms of really creating that true connection between Elm Grove Park and Narberth Park. The second big bucket is also with connectivity. We want to look at having a more generous sidewalk there too. So that's something that we see as a really safe thing. Improving the pedestrian bridge that currently comes off of the neighborhood into that site. and then also providing some form of ADA parking to make sure that we have access for all abilities into the site. Looking at environmental and habitat improvements, this is a place where we really can celebrate ecological systems. We're looking at ideas of meta restoration, and this was based off of the recommendation of our ecologist that looked at all 3 sites. And her recommendation was really looking at being able to provide meadow because that's kind of the core habitat that we need to provide for songbird habitat. And even though we don't see this as being large enough for nesting habitat, it is that kind of layover area where they need when they're kind of going between areas. And there's a lot of critical, it's the #1 habitat in decline in Pennsylvania in terms of meadow, and it's the most critical habitat for songbirds, which are in extreme peril right now in terms of their decline of population. So every little bit kind of helps, and it helps educate and kind of move people forward. So that's why we see that being kind of a key habitat for the site. It also is a very easily managed habitat in terms of controlling invasives. Since it is such a small site and you have a vector of roadways, you have a vector of the train rail line that passes next to it, and then you have a vector of a creek, it leaves a lot of opportunities for invasives to continually be pressuring that site. So meadow is a very easy way to maintain and control invasives from taking a foothold into the site again. We also want to look at the big idea of kind of, again, naturalizing those stream banks and making sure that we have some natural floodplain in that area. So that during flood events, we have some capacity to store water in that area. So that would be kind of, again, something that gets engineered, but it might look like a wetland along the stream, or maybe the stream changes course a little bit so that there's more capacity for volume in that site. We also want to look at, as we get further down where the site kind of necks down into a small crossing at the bridge, are there ways to kind of pull that end of the street away and start to have more of a riparian buffer? So that would be more plantings and trees that come up to the stream bank as opposed to roadway kind of dead-ending into the stream bank. Last is the street trees. Can we get some more street trees? So that adds shading benefits along the road, but also helps to buffer the site from the road. Safety was a big thing we talked about here. People were very concerned about how small the park was and how close it is to a busy road. So we want to look at how we can maybe define a separation between the road, the sidewalk. So we do this with something called a verge. So this would be a planted buffer. We could have a fence in that verge so that we have a clear separation, but also the street trees can be in that verge. In terms of the actual amenities that take place in the park, we want to look at walking trails that are a little more generous. We want them to be ADA accessible, so it should be an appropriate material that can go across slopes. We want to look at kind of a large area where people can just informally gather, maybe have a picnic with family and friends, or maybe a small outdoor classroom event. We had a lot of feedback about opportunities for nature-based play, and I'll show you images of what that looks like, but that this would be a great location since we're kind of looking at ecology, kind of tie that together with some nature-based play activities, make sure we have shade for sitting, and then also if we do have a boardwalk, maybe there's a small boardwalk that could go through a wetland for interpretation and learning. Again, programming is something that we kind of make recommendations towards, but this would be, what types of things do the township run in terms of a program there? So we see a lot of this being kind of educational focused. Maybe it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scout groups. It could be local elementary schools or daycares where they kind of come out and do a little presentation on the importance of songbirds and the type of habitat they need. Or is it something where you work with a college and they do testing and monitoring of the water? There's currently a water station there that the local watershed association does monitoring. So there's different ways and levels of educational programming you could include here. So how does this lay out onto a plan? First, we're going to look at some example images. So these are just kind of, slightly larger site, but this is a site in Hershey's Mill in the middle. This is East Goshen, Chester County, where we removed a dam and did a stream restoration, and we did include a small wetland pond within that restoration. There's boardwalk that moves through it. This is kind of a meadow habitat, so again, there's a lot of education about, it might look a little messy, but what's really happening in that meadow habitat? How many insects and birds are we supporting through that? But the idea that maybe you just have simple mode paths that go through there as well. And then the idea of kind of riparian buffers, so there can be a lot of color and interest that happens within all of these forms of habitat. Looking at structures, so we've talked about shade, so maybe there's kind of a little overlook on the boardwalk that has shade, and maybe there's seating in there for a small classroom opportunity. Bridges have a great potential to not just be functional, but to be pieces of art that convey values of your community in different ways. And then also boardwalk. Boardwalk can be many materials. A lot of times we do look at ones that are open grate because then it allows the sunlight to get through to the plant material underneath the boardwalk. Nature-based play. This can take all kinds of forms. A lot of times we look at very simple kind of found objects where you have a pile of sticks and you have maybe one central pole and kids can build their own teepee against it, things like that. They might be a little more structural, where someone actually took the time to make a seesaw. I won't tell you who that is. And it can be ways that people interact, stepping stones, carvings into logs, or even just the opportunity to draw with chalk. But the idea is just allow kids to kind of explore things in a little less structured way. And then there's also manufactured opportunities. One of the great ideas that came out of one of our committee meetings was, is there an opportunity to climb? Can we do some sort of climbing structure within our nature-based play area? So here's our refined concept. We'll kind of walk through this. We're going to zoom in starting at the northern end at the tunnel and kind of come down to Elmwood Ave. So really what we're talking about here, so this is that narrow, probably about 2.5 feet wide pathway that takes you under the tunnel. So this is that idea of having that wider plaza area there where you can kind of wait your turn to cross through the tunnel. But once you're coming out of that plaza area, having a much wider walkway that brings you down into the park area. And then this is where we would kind of start to separate and have that 10-foot wide walkway that would have you in the park. This is our verge with our street trees and our fencing that creates that clear separation between being in the park and being along the road itself. But in general, the whole sidewalk becomes part of the park infrastructure. We do have one pathway that would bring us down into the park, and this kind of winds its way down the slope so that it is accessible as you kind of walk into the park itself. And then what you're seeing in the darker gold area would be what we're representing as meadow, and then the lighter green becomes that open lawn area. So this becomes a nice lawn area built around a central existing tree, so we have lots of shade within that lawn as well if you would like some shade while you're out picnicking. And then off to the one side, kind of, again, we sided the playground so that it's, has some views down into the stream. It relates to the lawn, but it's also kind of tucked away from the road into the site. So you still have visual sight lines into that area, but you're not kind of up against the road in terms of being on the playground itself. What we're seeing in the light blue would be that stream corridor, and then what you're seeing in the dark green represents kind of that restoration zone of wetland, riparian habitat. And based on final engineering, the stream might want to curve through, or there might be wetlands through here. That's all to be determined through hydrological studies as they would develop the best way to bring water through there and create storage capacity in that space. But the idea is that you could have a boardwalk with maybe a little opportunity to step out into the wetland, and then this would be your kind of shaded viewing platform. And again, we gave a little thought about where this should look, trying to create a long view that goes up the stream as opposed to kind of looking into the neighboring property. And as this is developed, certain plantings could be encouraged in key spots of that wetland to help, again, buffer from the neighboring property. Think about things like natural dogwood, red twig dogwood, or willows, things that kind of start to create a buffer but still offer habitat. And then as we continue down, as we look at the connection to Elmwood Road, so again, we looked here at, currently the bridge is aligned with the southern part of the road. Kind of moving that up a little northern with a new bridge that would allow you to kind of enter right into the park. You can either stay on the sidewalk or take a side path up into those amenities we were talking to. But this is where we're looking at kind of removing part of the end of that road so that we can get more buffer planting in between the stream and the road itself. and then also offering ADA parking along the road here. We're not proposing regular parking within this park. We do see this as kind of a walk destination that you want to get to. We do need to look at some form of ADA parking. If you were to pursue public funding, you kind of need to include that within the project. So this would meet those needs. So that's kind of Elm Grove. We're going to move along to Station Square. So again, looking at some existing pictures of Station Square, we really see, and the square is so central to the borough. You have your train station right there. It itself is a connection. We see this as a place where people connect, you meet with friends, but you don't want to just pass through it, you want to stay there, right? The whole goal is how do we create a space that invites people into Narberth and encourages them to stay and support your businesses. It also needs to be a place that, is a host to the community. You have a lot of community events that a lot of them end here and start here. So we want to make sure we plan for that as well. So this was the plan that was developed during Squared Circle. This was completed back in 2022. So it had some key components that it looked at. This plan really focused on the multimodal connections through the square, as well as kind of defining the space. The big idea here is that the streetscape and the plaza all kind of flow into one, and with this whole area being tabled so that if you were a pedestrian walking across, you're actually not stepping across curbs, you're just at grade. So during a large festival, the idea is this whole block would shut down and it could be a whole public space. During a smaller festival, the street could still function as is, but you have this wide open space in this area as well. So a lot of what looked at was how we get people up to the platforms, getting a ramp down to the underpass, as well as new stairs. So that's a lot of this configuration was determined in 2022, and we kind of are using this as our starting point to look at additional programming ideas for this key plaza area, because we are focused more on recreation at this point is what we're really looking at. So again, in terms of those program elements, a lot of the connectivity improvements were identified during that plan. So we have our stairs and our ramps that are getting us places. We've thought about loading areas for businesses getting deliveries. We've thought about emergency access in and out behind to the new development at Haverford Ave. And then we talked a little bit about that idea of a raised table. It's used a lot in Europe. The term is called a Warnorf. And then we also want to look at how we get bike lanes through here, or some sort of bike circulation through this area as well. In terms of environment and habitat, obviously we're in a very paved place up here. Some of the biggest things that we'll kind of start to identify is how we control stormwater a little bit better here. Can we get more trees into this area? And then also, can we have some planting areas, and can we bring those into the space? We had a stakeholder meeting that was focused specifically on looking at this area. We had representatives from the farmers market as well as business owners, kind of give feedback. Shade came up a lot. People wanted to make sure we're providing adequate shade. They wanted to make sure that if we were going, we went a little back and forth on the stage. It was important to maybe have a dedicated space for a stage for performances, but not to have it read like a stage. It should be able to have other functions throughout the year. Shade on that space would be important, and then also having kind of the dedicated electrical infrastructure built in for that stage, so it can function during large community events, or even during the farmers market, having a small ensemble playing music during kind of a smaller event. Looking at a variety of seating areas, bike parking, it was brought up having covered parking was really critical for bikes. And then also, again, benches, bistro seating, kind of that movable furniture. In terms of programming, you guys do a lot of programming here. You have your community events, a lot do end and start here. The farmers market has been very successful this year. There's also other little things that you can start to think about. Do we have yoga in the square on Saturdays? Is there a quarterly dinner in the square where local people, you pick up a basket from a local business and there's tables set up and you all dine in the square? Are there summer sunset socials where you have an ice cream truck in the square and everyone kind of comes out and gets ice cream and watches the sunset together? Things like that, just kind of starting to think about how can you do a little more to kind of engage this place on a more regular basis. So we're not adding a lot at this point, but we do, kind of building off of that original plan. We'll talk a little bit about this when we get to Narberth Park. But one of the things we've thought about, what happens if you start to change the one-way direction of Windsor Ave and Narberth Ave? So that if you're coming through the tunnel, you can turn onto Narberth Ave and go straight up into town. And if you're going out of town, you're going down Windsor Ave. That starts to eliminate the need for like a contraflow bike lane, right? It also sets up the park and ride on the right side of the train station. Little things like that. So we'll kind of explore that a little bit more as we look at Narberth Park, but it kind of starts to set up a different language when you change how cars move through here. In terms of looking at those ramps, you'll see we now have a large shade structure that kind of comes over this area. Does this somehow work into a new platform shade structure? We've kind of identified a location for a stage on the back end. So these are your ramps going down to the tunnel. You would have a stage here, and then maybe some tiers of lawn that work down into the pavilion. So when it's not a stage, it becomes an informal seating area for people to gather and maybe have a little bit of more green space as opposed to being in the open pavement. And then also kind of tucking away some bike racks, so also you're using that storage, and that shade cover starts to do multi-purposes. It's not just shading a stage, it's providing elements or protections from the elements for train, when you're waiting for the train, and then also places for your bike. And then, the last element is just the idea of kind of those open, movable pieces of furniture. And then we have our driveway access that gives us access to the rear of this development. There is parking there that would be both public and private. And then also that kind of unloading area here along Howard Ave.
When you said parking, public and private, where would that be?
So the rear building, the new development, has parking that is both designated for the residents of that building as well as public parking. So that is the 230 development for Haverford Ave.
And train station parking is only on the other side?
Correct. So yes, this would be we would maintain on-street parking here as well, yeah.
And on Haverford right there, have you lost parking in front of those businesses?
Yes, so we just please hold your questions till the end. We do still have a lot, but yeah. No, definitely. So what you're seeing is there's no parking on this side of the road. We're maintaining parking up here. Obviously, the parking in the plaza has been removed, which is about 15 spaces, counting all of those together, that you lose in this concept. So that's something that was explored during the 2022 plan. I think everyone understood there was a loss of parking. It's not that it's a done deal. We still want to hear feedback on that, but it is the reality. You can't really have both here. So you either have a plaza that's dedicated to gathering space, or you have parking. Okay, moving to Narberth Park. So, Narberth Park is an amazing community park. You guys, this park is so used. I think every time I've gone past it, there's multiple activities going on. It has a long history. It's been fun to kind of learn about the history of the Legion's baseball field. It's also been fun to learn about the history of the basketball courts. There's a lot of just, Will Chamberlain played on those courts. Allen Iverson played on those courts. I mean, there's a lot of history in this park. So we want to make sure we come up with a plan that meets the needs of the community. There's also regional needs that are being met here. Those basketball courts and the baseball field are regional facilities. So with that, we need parking. We need to make sure that as we move forward that we're looking at walkways so that everybody has access into this park and can get to all the facilities. We want to make sure that we have places for just people to hang out and gather, right? Just a small place to sit and talk with your friends. We hear that in a lot of communities. We heard that during our stakeholder meetings, that teenagers just need to be able to sit and hang out. So we really want to look at a way that this continues to be a community park, but that we just celebrate the fact that this is Narberth community and that there's a long history in this park and a lot of active uses that have taken place in this park. Yeah, I don't know what just happened. be. I'm going to pull the other one out of the bag. So with Marwood Park, we did look at 3 initial concepts, and again, similar to Elm Grove Park, the idea of the concepts was really to get feedback from the committee, the stakeholders, key person interviews, to kind of understand what's a priority, what are the values here, and how to refine that program down. So one of the things that we were tasked with looking at, and you'll see in concept 3, was the idea of daylighting the East Indian Branch Creek in the park. So currently that creek is so where that creek comes out of Norbrook neighborhood is obviously, you can see it, there's surface waters. Once it comes under Windsor Ave, it is then piped under the park itself, and then it continues in a pipe as it goes under the railroad track, and then it pops up in Elm Grove Park. So really, we were looking at that idea of what happens when you start to daylight that stream. So there's a lot of surface space that you need, right? And this was an initial concept that we took. We since had a meeting with DEP, so Department of Environmental Protection, just to kind of talk through the concept, right? What does it look like to daylight a stream? They actually said you probably need a little more space than what you're showing on your concepts. I think it was maybe twice as much space. And then there's also just the whole logistics. You don't just dig a hole where you want the stream to be. You have to dig a channel to bypass the stream, right? So maybe you have a channel that went through here, or maybe you have a channel that goes through here, so that you can actually build the end channel, right? It's a lot of disruption. It impacts everything in the park as you start to do that. And then once you have that daylit stream, you have less space to look at program items. So I think there was a lot of support for this idea. People really liked it as an idea, but when you start to think about, well, maybe you don't have a 90-foot baseball field if you were to daylight the stream. Maybe you don't have as much space for a skate park if you daylight the stream. So kind of really starting to look at the logistics of giving up part of your 8 acres of open space was really a hard sell. So that's something that we kind of decided, you know what, it's not the time to explore that. There's more important priorities for the borough, because that's just the logistics, it's not the price tag either, right? That would be, out of all these concepts, that would be the most expensive concept to pursue. So we kind of took that idea off the table, talking through it with the committee. So that kind of left how we refined the feedback that we got. You know, I think one of the things we came into this, every time we met with someone else, we heard about a different team sport activity that takes place on your sports fields. This is not a 90-foot baseball field. This is a true multi-purpose field. It's used year-round for endless activities. So we really want to make sure that whatever we do there, it supports a future where that field has the ability to support that constant use. A lot of communities that don't depend on one field are able to let fields rest for a season, or even just be able to do fall maintenance. Your maintenance crew does an amazing job maintaining that field for how much use it gets. So we want to make sure that whatever recommendations we make kind of supports that moving forward. So then we're kind of left looking at how do we start to address what happens over in this side, and what facilities do we look at. So we'll kind of go at what we've come up with as a refined program. One of the things we talked about a lot during our early meetings and through all the stakeholder feedback was just having improved walkways around the park. The sidewalks currently are about 4.5 feet wide. If you're pushing a stroller on that type of sidewalk, it can be really hard if you have to pass someone, if someone's walking the dog on the sidewalk. So really looking at more generous sidewalks around the park. Again, looking at crosswalks. You know, we talked a lot about Windsor Ave and how dangerous that crosswalk is. People go down Windsor Ave very quickly. So looking at ways to improve crosswalks, looking at ways to address parking in a holistic way. Can we make parking lots a little greener, get more stormwater into them? Can we maximize parking on streets? So kind of looking at that, making sure we're thinking about it. how do we get bikes here, and then also how do we get people into the tunnel, right? Environmental stuff here, not as strong as maybe Elm Grove, but really looking at, again, stormwater BMPs. You know, as we start to upgrade things in this park, it's the opportunity to build in that stormwater infrastructure that currently doesn't exist there. Making sure that we're planting trees, right? We always want to try to maximize our tree coverage, especially in our parks. And then also looking at kind of, are there opportunities for smaller little walking gardens that can be educational gardens? Can we build upon the community gardens that are there as well? In terms of site amenities, I think ADA walkways and connecting to facilities in this park is probably a top priority in my mind of what needs to happen here to really create a park that embraces the whole community. Being able to get out of your car and walk to the playground on a walkway, I think is a critical thing to have happen as you guys move your park forward. Obviously the sport fields, we see those remaining, are very important to the community. The War Memorial, how can we kind of embrace that and let it be the important space it is, but also be part of the park? Inclusive playground. You know, this is something that people kind of throw out a lot in terms of a new term. You know, we talk a lot about accessibility. So that's like, how do you get to the playground, right? How do you have an even surface? Can you get up onto the coolest thing? That's something they talk a lot about in inclusive play. What's the coolest thing? Can everyone get to it, right? So it might just be something, it's not about getting people to the highest part on a ramp, because they might get up there and there's nothing for them to do. The coolest thing might be at ground level, and it might be a teeter-totter or a spinner. So really kind of thinking about how people want to play. It addresses not just mobility, which is kind of 1% of disabilities, but it looks at cognitive disabilities, and a whole range. Sight disabilities are a large one too. So really, how does play allow people to interact, and kind of everyone can play kind of side by side, even if you're at different levels, right? So that's kind of the idea between inclusive play. Court areas, you know, the basketball courts are important. We had a lot of conversations about pickleball. It's a very popular sport. And then also kind of looking at the idea of just having a smaller multi-court area where younger kids still have the opportunity to play on courts, but aren't competing with teenagers or adults to get onto a basketball court. Skate plazas, definitely. You'll see we have an idea where we kind of incorporate a skate plaza. Unstructured lawn, this is really valuable in every park, right? If there's baseball going on, like, we still want a place where kids can just play and be kids within the park itself. So just having that area where you have lawn to throw a football, throw a frisbee, fly a kite, that type of play, or let it serve as a gathering area for an event. Again, looking at varieties of seating, sizes of gathering spaces, performance area, your concerts in the parks are very popular. We want to make sure we hold a place for that and kind of build upon that in terms of having the proper infrastructure. Restrooms, concessions, and storage buildings, these are all things that are there today that I think everyone appreciates and wants to see improved as we move forward. In terms of your park programming, you guys extensively do a great job at programming this park. We want to make sure we're just kind of proposing a plan that helps you better build upon that programming. I think there's little that we can suggest at this point that you guys aren't already doing in the park and doing well. This is the wrong one. Sorry, I got talking. Okay. So the multi-purpose courts. So one of the things we wanted to look at in terms of pickleball is there a way, like, we don't want to give over all the basketball courts to pickleball, but is there a way maybe like one of the courts, we have 2 lined pickleball courts, so that during the afternoon, early in the morning, you know, people could use those courts when they're not actively being used for basketball all the time. But when they're scheduled for basketball, they're obviously there for basketball. So it's a way to kind of extend usability in the courts to all times of the day, and also kind of provide for that popular recreation pickleball. We do think the current basketball court location would be ideal in terms of it being the furthest away from residences. Pickleball, if you've been in a park with a lot of pickleball courts, it can get loud. It also, we don't see it as, we're recommending 2 courts because we think we don't want this to be a pickleball complex. that has a whole nother connotation that it becomes a regional amenity, and people, when you have a pickleball complex, they're playing on it from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and it's constantly being used. And that's not what we think Narberth needs. We think maybe they need 2 courts where people from the community can have a pickup game and kind of come, but it doesn't become a meetup place for pickleball leagues. And then the idea of kind of a small multi-purpose court. We love this concept of the round basketball court. It's a fun way to kind of maybe have one goalpost, but then you can have other activities, or you can have 2 goalposts. That just creatively allows for a pickup game to happen at a younger age. Looking at seating in the park, we want to definitely look at all types of seating, kind of small gathering areas, movable tables, even just your bleacher seating, making sure that it has accessible places, that it's modern. We did hear from Public Works, having movable bleachers are a great win for them because it gives them the ability to move them around depending on what the event is. So kind of looking at that model as we move forward with upgrading bleachers as needed. Skate, so we're kind of talking about the idea of a skate plaza. This is a little different from like a skate park. There's a lot of melding between the two, but the idea with a plaza, and I think Paynes Park in Philadelphia, not saying that's the scale of park you should have here, but it kind of shows how that plaza works for an event. They hold a lot of races where a lot of times they end and begin at the skate park itself. So there's a lot of kind of informal built-in seating that also functions as skate features when you're not having an event. This is probably a little more of a traditional plaza, or I'm sorry, skate park. Just to kind of give you a size there, that's about 8,000 square feet. And you start to see the types of elements that you would see in a skate park. So kind of looking at how those blend so that, if a skate park ends up in Narberth Park, we think it needs to be multifunctional, right? Everything in this park is multifunctional if you're not picking up on the theme yet. Because you have such limited park space, everything needs to be able to function for multiple uses to get your value. So again, kind of looking at the idea of a performance space, the idea that we're kind of looking at is how can we develop a performance space where you have that nice shade canopy, maybe it's elevated a little bit, so it really embraces a performance area or a crowd, but then does it also work into our restrooms? Can we come up with an architectural style that meets our storage needs? Can the concession stand, can we all kind of start to meet all 3 of those needs or 4 of those needs in one structure that maybe is a little more central to the park? Sorry, I lost my microphone there. The last thing we kind of talked about, is themed gardens. So there's an area where we think, as you get over towards Wynwood Ave, at the end of the baseball field, there's kind of some unprogrammed space there. Is there a way to kind of create space there that gives people opportunities to maybe be in a quieter part of the park if baseball's not going on, and kind of explore different ideas over in that area. So we'll kind of talk a bit more to that. This is really neat. If you've been to the King of Prussia Business District, they have beehives just throughout their parking lots, just kind of randomly here and there, and they have an active beekeeper, and they run programs to kind of educate people on bees. I think you can go to honey harvest, things like that. But just like a really small, simple program that, as long as you have someone who wants to be the sponsor and run it, it's a great way to just kind of have an educational feature without a lot of infrastructure. This is also a pollinator wall. So when we talk about honeybees, they're great pollinators, but they're not native pollinators. There's a lot of native pollinators that we just don't see because they're not hive creatures. They tend to be independent creatures, so they live in little single holes. But they're really important. They do almost just as much pollination as our honeybees pollinate. So both are critical to our habitat moving forward. So with Narberth Park, we looked at 2 refined concepts. So we definitely want to hear your feedback tonight on both these concepts and kind of understand what you like, what you don't like, and we'll kind of walk through. First, we're going to start by going about connectivity improvements, which are the same in each concept, so we'll go through those first. And then we'll kind of go through, the western area of the park, which again is the same on each, and then we'll end in the east area of the park where we kind of come up with a couple different ideas for that area. So looking at connectivity improvements, I think the biggest thing here is we're looking at how can we improve our intersections? How can we get crosswalks that make a little more sense and safely get people into the park at key places? We also want to kind of talk a little bit about how do we maintain parking on roads? Do we look at bike lanes on roads? What does that start to look at? And then also kind of how is there a way to kind of maybe green the parking lot a little bit, make sure it has pedestrian facilities within the parking so that you're not just arriving in a sea of cars, but you have a place where you can clearly get safely out of your car and into the park. So that's kind of the key connectivity things we're looking at. The other thing we kind of looked at was the idea of that 10-foot wide sidewalk all the way around. We were able to kind of establish that. It does require replacement of street trees along Windsor Ave. And then it also, where we have the one dugout, we would have, again, it wouldn't be 10 feet wide. We would have to crunch down because we don't have room in the roadway to kind of cut into the road there and maintain the travel lanes that we would need. And we can't really move the field just because it really is the smallest field that you would want to propose in this type of area. So zooming in on those intersections, we're looking at the Haverford and Wynwood Ave intersection. So this is the southern one. So currently, if you've kind of walked on this regional trail over to the adjacent train station, it kind of comes out right at the driveway, puts you in a bit of a no man's land where you're kind of at an intersection, not at an intersection. There is a flashing beacon that I guess alerts drivers. But we really think it would be a lot safer if working with the neighboring property owner, kind of eliminating the current wall there, which not a lot of grading has to happen to do that, but bring that trail straight down and kind of move that crosswalk so it's really in line with the intersection. This would also work out with any future potential kind of staging of traffic going through the bridge if that were to ever be a signaled intersection as well. Here we're kind of showing the idea that that would continue straight into a bike lane, and this is where we're looking at that reverse change in Haverford Ave. So now you would be going east into town on Haverford Ave, and then that bike lane would be going into town as well. And then a minor improvement of the crosswalk to bring you over into an improved kind of generous walkway at the baseball field. Going a little further north at the Wynwood and Haverford Ave. I'm sorry, this is not Haverford Ave. But your northern intersection there. Currently, if you've used this crosswalk, I don't know, is there a raise of hands of people that have used this? It makes a weird jig-jag. So it's not a straight crosswalk. It kind of starts back here and then it diverts over to meet the other sidewalk. So the idea here is a slight realignment, adjustment of the curve radius so that you can straighten out that sidewalk. So it just becomes a little safer for users as they're crossing the road. And then this is where pairing with the one-way into town, this would be your one-way out of town. So again, we are showing a bike lane in this concept, and then you would get some on-street parking with that one-way out.
We just want to note it's just mislabeled, so that
Yeah.
was Windsor Avenue.
Yeah.
Just want that.
Thank you. So looking at Narbrook Park, or Narbrook Park Road, I guess this is Narbrook Park, where that road comes out onto Windsor Ave, and then this is the existing playground where we're proposing new playground facilities. Here we're recommending that each of these crosswalks actually be tabled. So that means that the crosswalk sits at the same height as the curb. So if you're a car coming across here, you actually have to slow down to go over the table. It might even be that the whole intersection is tabled. That's something that we'd have to look at with emergency vehicles because these are very close, or maybe one of them would be tabled based on the ideal geometry for emergency vehicles to pass through that area. But to help with drainage through there, we're also proposing a bump out. So again, this necks down the amount of road that a pedestrian has to cross with that bump out. It allows for a place for stormwater to collect. So I know they've started to implement some in other areas of the borough where they've done those curb bump outs, so something very similar to that. And then it also helps to really define the on-street parking as well. Having those bump outs kind of signals to people that, okay, you should expect to see cars parked along the street as you're driving. And in general, just starts to slow people down. So this is that existing cross-section through the Windsor Ave. So again, you're seeing this would be the playground area here. This is our existing narrow sidewalk. The cartway with you actually have on-street parking on both sides of the, on one side of the cartway, it kind of switches which side of the road it's on, and then you have 2 travel lanes, and then you still have just under 5-foot sidewalk, but it does get a little wider in this area because of just a landing behind the sidewalk. So what does it start to look like if you do that table? So this is where you see the active crossing of the cartway. It gets a lot more narrow. You have those bump outs with the rain gardens here, and then you have that 10-foot wide sidewalk. We're proposing kind of a little seating area with maybe benches that look both out to the sidewalk as well as into the park. And then you would have your kind of new fencing for the playground, and then your new street trees kind of inside the park to allow for that wider sidewalk in this area. Haverford Ave, you know, one of the things we kind of talked throughout our last committee meeting is when you add those bike lanes, you lose the ability to have on-street parking, right? You can't have a safe bike lane and the on-street parking and maintain your travel lane width that you need. So one of the things we looked at, you know, when you reverse the one-way pairs, you no longer need what they call a contraflow lane to get people from the regional trail into downtown. They can now use the road with Sharrows because this is a low volume road. It is safe enough to have a share the road facility without needing the dedicated bike lane. So we feel like there is the opportunity to explore both options moving forward. There might be reasons why you think the dedicated bike lane should be a priority over having Sharrows. But with the one-way in, it gives the opportunity to explore both. The advantage of not having the bike lane is you can maintain that parking on either side of the road and still have your travel lane be shared by both vehicles and bikes. So again, what we kind of explored in the section, this is your existing section, so this is the Amtrak, the railroad's at the top of the hill here. This is our cartway. The cartway varies through here. Where we measured it, it was around 17 feet. For a travel lane, typically fire trucks want to see a minimum of 12 feet for their travel lane. And then you have your parking, parallel parking of 8 feet. Again, we have a very narrow sidewalk, a small lawn area, and then you're into the basketball courts. So what a change in this might look like, and here we decided to look at what does it look like if you have a cartway where bikers and vehicles can share the same lane, which is called Sharrows. You maintain that parallel parking. We have our 10-foot wide sidewalk. We get a little bit more of a planting buffer where we get some trees in, because we are looking at the idea that maybe we shift the basketball courts a little bit. Not instantly, but when the time comes to rebuild them as they start to get towards the end of their life. There's reasons to kind of look at, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the plan, about why you would want to rebuild the basketball courts. Looking at parking. We kind of looked at a concept, and we wanted to make sure we included some key things. We wanted to make sure we had a pedestrian drop-off area. This can also function for food trucks to kind of stage in that area as well. We wanted to make sure we got tree coverage in the parking lot, so having some planting islands. We also wanted to make sure, is there a way where we can, you know, there's 2 parcels that are part of the township or borough property. Is there a way to kind of tuck Public Works a little bit more out of the parking lot and give them an area where they could screen kind of their yard's material area? And then last is looking at, can we get a sidewalk, right? So if you're parking over here and you don't want to kind of trudge your kids across the parking lot, we have a sidewalk where we can kind of walk along and get into the park itself. So those are kind of the key things that we're looking at and kind of creating a little bit more of a modern parking lot within this area. Looking at the baseball field, you know, mostly what we're looking at is how to, I think we'll make recommendations within the master plan in terms of, you know, improvements to the quality of the field in terms of grading, things like that. There's not a lot of infrastructure that we recommended needing to be added to the field itself. We do think there's opportunities for the secondary baseball field to be improved a little bit, so that maybe in the future it can function both for baseball and softball if that were needed. but also just kind of making sure we improve this field a little bit as well. We definitely want to look at new bleachers along the baseball field and upgrading those. We also want to look at kind of creating entry points into the park and kind of some placemaking so that you feel like you've arrived to the park, right? So this is the first place where we start to look at that. This might be an opportunity where you explore some of the history behind the baseball field within that plaza. But it just gives you a place to kind of, maybe there's signage, park signage there that kind of gives you the name of the field or the name of the park so that you have a sense that you've arrived as you come into the park. With the newer bleachers, we're still able to accommodate the same kind of number. We were given a number of like 200, 250 spectators. But then where we formerly had bleachers, looking at grading a natural hillsides, that you have overflow hillside seating along here. On the back side of that hillside, we do have a pathway that connects up to Windward Ave. At the top of that, you have the opportunity, maybe we have a bike repair station there, so people, it's not too far off of that regional trail. And then also kind of connects down into and ties into the Veteran War Memorial. And the opportunity here is where we kind of envision that themed garden. So whether it be pollinators, sensory garden, or kind of a reflection garden, but kind of just little themed rooms or themed plots with benches where you can kind of sit and explore a different theme over in this area. We'll go over into concept 1 on the eastern side here. So here we looked at the idea of what happens if we try to open up the space a little bit and create a little more green space in this area. So in this concept, we don't look at a skate park. So the idea is we remove the tennis court skate park area and we start to relocate the performance area so that becomes central to that area. This would be a new central stage, pavilion, concession stand with bathrooms, and then a stage opening up onto this new open lawn. At the back end of that lawn is the idea that maybe we have some stone dust planting with a tree grove, kind of similar to one of the photos I showed you, with some informal seating. So during a non-event, that becomes just a casual place where you might meet up to have morning coffee. And then that relates directly to the playground area itself. So we looked at the existing tree layout and kind of came up with a playground layout. Again, this is just a concept. This is by no means the final equipment choices, but the idea was we wanted to make sure we still maintain swings. That's something that you have in the park today. So kind of looking at what you would need for 6 bay swings, so 2 top swings, 2 regular belt swings, and then also 2 accessible swings. Looking at kind of one key component play system that would be for ages of 5 to 12. The idea of maybe some accessory play. This is an accessible spinner. And then also kind of a component play that would be for younger ages, 2 to 5. And then this is that idea of that multi-court. And this is very similar to the location of the current basketball court, just a slight different configuration so that we can accommodate pathways through here and also work with existing trees. So again, that still kind of has a close relationship to the younger baseball field, which is always nice to kind of have that playground close to that baseball field. We also look at kind of expanding and improving the community gardens a little bit. We do lose some of the existing beds with the addition of our walkway through here, so kind of picking those up on the other side here. And then with our basketball courts, so one of the things we wanted to make sure we identified with the basketball court is that we have the recommended safety area around it. So you should have 10 feet of safety area outside of your court line before you start to have bleachers. So that's what you're seeing here is that added 10-foot buffer, maintaining a walkway through that area for team benches to kind of sit in that walkway, and then having bleachers on both sides of that court. So the footprint of the basketball court does grow a little bit, but we're still maintaining the 2 different sizes of courts. One is a full-size, adult basketball court. The other is geared towards high school, junior high basketball. Maybe a smaller storage building here, and then again, this is one of those entry plazas that becomes a node, and again, that might be an opportunity to explore the history of the basketball courts within that plaza. And then our last plaza would be up at the library, kind of a small plaza here that ties into the playground and brings you into the park itself. So that's refined concept 1. Looking at refined concept 2, this is where we wanted to explore the idea of what happens if you kind of improve Escape Plaza within the park. So with that one, we still thought it made sense to kind of maintain it in that central area where the tennis court is. The tennis courts kind of fit within the edge of this walkway to the edge of this walkway. So we are kind of cutting into those tennis courts to allow for movement and circulation around the Skate Plaza itself. So I think this lays out to be about 8,000 square feet. So it is a smaller Skate Plaza in terms of what we're showing here. We do still maintain that kind of performance lawn, but the idea is that stage area with the bathhouse and storage and concession stand kind of starts to become an appendix to the library. So this is something that would have to take in a lot of architectural consideration about how you kind of add that on. Maybe there's a breezeway that allows you to kind of pass between the building and here so that you can get behind, because the bathrooms would want to be on the back side here as opposed to on the performance side. But that's kind of the idea. So again, this would be a raised stage area opening up onto the lawn. We have existing trees here where we're kind of using that stone dust treatment to create seating areas and that tree grove. Our multi-purpose younger court area has kind of shifted over to this location, and then our swings have kind of shifted over here to look out over on the baseball field. So that's how everything kind of moves around a little bit as you start to create space for Escape Plaza within here. Still maintaining a drop-off and kind of, the idea with Escape Plaza is maybe it would sit above grade, about 18 inches, so you would have steps that kind of allow you to enter into here. That also becomes informal seating if there's a performance going on. And then also steps along here that if you're watching a basketball game, it also starts to become informal seating. So that it really starts to tie into other activities that might be going on in and around the park. So with that, we just have the two side by side, but I'm going to pass off to Anina just to kind of introduce our Q&A and how we're going to run that, and then we'll open it up to hear from you.
Thank you, Sarah. Boy, that was a marathon of information, wasn't it? And I appreciate all your attention to Sarah and how we got to these refined concepts. So now, your input, your questions and your comments, which we'd like to take now. And what I'd just like to preface it is that we'd like to go in the same order that we presented it to you. So we're going to start with Elm Grove, and then go to Station Square, and then go to Narberth Park. And what I'd like to do is, I will be in the audience, Sarah will be the MC certainly, and direct the questions between all of us on the team to be able to answer them for you. But we'd like to ask if you would consider limiting your time to 2 minutes. And we'd like to hear your name and whether you're a borough resident or whether you're a Lower Merion Township resident or some other interested person. So we'd like to know your name and where you come from when you take the microphone. I will bring the microphone to you. I am really just going to try to zigzag across. This is where I'm going to get my steps in, back and forth. We will also take a break to see if there's some questions that are going to be coming on from the people that are participating online. Michelle, how many people do we have online? 17 people. So we are going to ask the people that are online if you could just use the question and answer and type your questions. Michelle will keep track of them, and we'll take breaks so that we can repeat your questions. We won't ask you to actually verbalize them. We'll have Michelle kind of respond and broadcast those questions. So that's what we'd like to do. I would respectfully ask, I know everyone here is conscious of time, especially how much time. So we're looking at about 45 minutes left to talk about your comments and your input to that. All of this will be recorded for sure. We're going to have all of these boards up where you can come and write things down. You can mark things on the board afterwards. So again, but most importantly, I think that what I want to show you with the next slide. Give that to me, Sarah.
What's the next slide?
This is the.
What are you trying to get to?
I just want to get got the concepts. Back. Yeah, on the back of your agendas, we've set up a new survey, which is strictly a place called feedback, where you can type in everything you have on comments and questions on the refined concept plans. So we have the almost 800 for the first part, but there's also a code there and a link that takes you right to just a place where you can type comments and questions, right, based on what you've heard tonight. This presentation and all of the plans are going to be posted on the website. I'm going to send them to Alan tomorrow, so they'll be available for you to look at. And then maybe you take the code will be there as well, so you can look at them one more time. You're welcome to stay here as long as you like. You won't be sleeping here for sure. Again, so we'll start with the questions and answers. Elm Grove Park, so we'll get that one up there for us to talk about. There's our refined plan, and we'll start with comments and questions.
Thank you. I'm George Lonsdorf. I live on the south side of Narberth. And I see your boundaries for this plan take in both sides, both banks of the stream. And I know that when we talked in those key people conversations, you were saying, well, the boundary's right down the middle of the stream. We only have access to the one bank. Is that changed? Is that...
No,
So
that,
we won't be able to restore both banks?
so, sorry, I think you're supposed to be on the meeting.
Okay, so that's a great question. I think, so we've looked at it both ways. It's totally acceptable to approach just restoring one side of the bank, right? When we can engineer that where it just maintains the existing wall that is on the adjacent property owner. And moving forward, we probably should. So the parcel lines in the study areas are slightly different, right? But the study areas should be to the middle of the stream. So we'll fix that on maps moving forward because you're correct in that regard. But if the property owner is open to the idea that maybe they want to look at restoration as well, it's something that could be done in tandem where you look at doing a construction easement. So it's not a permanent easement, it would be a construction easement to address both sides of the stream if the property owner is open to it. And that might be something that maybe, it might be 5 to 10 years before this is really a full stream restoration, right? There might be other things that we implement in the park. So that's one of the things we'll look at in the draft plan is cost and phasing and what's priorities, right? So if you don't have a willing landowner and the priority is to do both sides, then maybe the borough waits until you have a willing property owner. Or maybe it's important to do it sooner than later and you decide we want to look at the option where we just do the one side restoration. So I think either way it can work and it would add value to the habitat and to floodwater capacity for stormwater storage.
Just wanted to add to what Sarah said. Narberth Borough has a pollution reduction plan. Anytime you can improve the natural course of a stream to allow for riparian restorations, you are reducing pollutants, you're allowing sediment. So it's a really strong case to support all of the folks who are so interested, and there's so many of them, and understand that ecological need to address stormwater in the stream. So even doing the one side is a huge step for the borough in reaching those goals of your pollution reduction plan. So ideally, it would be great, George, if we could do both sides, right? One side does actually improve things quite a bit.
Next question.
My name is Joaquin. I live in the borough, and I just wanted to comment on the skate park and how beautiful it is to see so many young people here. I know there's so many skaters here.
Sorry, so we are focused on Elm Grove first. So.
Well, I'm about to dip, so I just wanted to comment on this. So it's just like, it's really meaningful when you see a lot of young people getting involved, right? I know normally, no offense, but young people aren't really into this type of thing. So when you see so many young people so adamant about this thing that's part of the community, I think you should really take note on that, especially something that's so important for mental health. I know myself, whenever I'm having a rough day, I'll just go down to the skate park. It's so welcoming. It's a very positive environment. And when you can just have a safe place to go where you can actually express yourself, and be physical. I think it's just a beautiful thing.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so we would just ask everyone else moving forward that we focus on growth first.
Hi, thank you. You know what, my name is Andrea Bagnell. I have been a Narberth resident for 32 years. And I just actually have a question regarding the survey, and thank you for keeping that open. Can you tell us what percentage of respondents are actually Narberth residents versus outside? And I'm sorry if that information was shared before.
No, I mean, I don't think we have that off the top of our heads, but we can follow up with that. Anita, do you have a sense?
The last time that I had actually done the full, and this is about a month ago, so we've had quite a bit of interest. In the month of September, just September, there was about 245 responses of the 800 total. So you can kind of see there's waves of when we got the interest. So prior to the 240 that came in September, we had roughly a 70-30 split, right? So about 30% Lower Merion or outside of Narberth and 70%. So, but that's not, like I said, we had quite a surge, about 20%. So.
Yeah.
I would just be curious to know that information moving forward.
Yeah, and to speak to the survey a little bit, I think a lot of times it's easy to think of the survey as a vote, and that is by no means what it's meant to be. It's a way for us to engage with the public, because there's a lot of people that are more comfortable giving feedback on a survey than they are at a public meeting. But it's also a way for us to just kind of, and we like to call it as like a temperature. We can take a temperature of the room and kind of understand where values lie. So sometimes people feel like the surveys seem a little long, and it's because we're asking questions in a different way that might, get a different little bit of a response. But by no means do we look at it and say, 300 people said build a water slide, and we're putting in a water slide. So just keep that in mind of how we use it as a tool, and it's not the be-all, end-all.
Just wanted to remind you too, there's things that you liked about the plans in Elm Grove, or any of them, of course. We'd love to hear what you like, or I liked this about something, and I'd love to see, it was previously shown, and why isn't that kind of thing. So, anything left for Elm Grove?
I know there was a lot of interest in stream access for Elm Grove Park, and I was wondering if this included any stream access availability.
Yeah, I think within the stream bank restoration, it's something we didn't focus on tonight, but it's easily accommodated. The idea with the boardwalk, you can have that with stepping stones. So that's something that can kind of be fine-tuned. It's kind of hard to show it on a plan sometimes, but yeah, there's definitely opportunities for that.
And I will actually say, Jean, but our focus group with young parents, as much as people do love that stream access, it's equally as much of a concern too. So you heard that both places. So a boardwalk in the wetlands certainly takes you down to that level, and you certainly do, and we could encourage that, right? We're not hearing that is, again, something we thought was a great thing to finally get to play in a stream. Like we've had some pictures showing that there was concerns about that, right? And that was something that came up about daylighting the stream in Narberth Park. I was like, wow, this is a place there was no water. Me as a mother, I didn't have to think about that. If we daylight the stream, boy, that was a concern. So that was something that we kind of heard about. So you don't see that specifically.
We've had a question up in front for a while.
All right.
You're on. You're good.
I don't really have something to say for Elmwood, but why did you basically? I actually did like for the Narberth Park. I actually did like the idea of digging up the stream, because you really can't build on a river.
Yeah, I think so. That's something that I think where we all appreciate the idea that we could have visual access to the stream. Currently there is a culvert under there that does convey the stream safely under the park, and the cost to reveal the stream is astronomical, for lack of a better word. And you lose a lot of amenities that people equally value. As much as you value seeing the stream, there are things that would be lost that are of important value to other people as well. So we kind of have to weigh all those different recommendations, all those different components when we get to the final recommendation. And that's something I hope everyone kind of understands in this room. You might not see everything you want up in these parks, but at the end of the day, we're talking about 8 acres of land. And how do we serve the community in the best way possible with those 8 acres?
Also, is this meeting going to go after 9 o'clock?
We're hoping we can keep it tight to 9, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We do have a question in the back here, in the red.
I think the biggest downfall to the Elm Grove Park is able to get to it. I think that the thought of having to go under the tunnel is not, it's not a good idea. Trying to walk under that tunnel and there's traffic going in both ways, and the thought of saying, oh, well, we'll wait till the biker goes by before the stroller goes by. You can't walk on that, you can't walk under that tunnel on a good day, much less a really crowded day. My name is Carolyn Scanlon, I'm a 45-year resident of Narberth.
And we definitely appreciate that comment. The tunnel poses a major logistic issue. And it's not one that's easily solved. We will explore ideas that require additional studies that we can't address within the scope of this project in terms of future recommendations that the township might want to explore for that. But it's important to think this is the only park on the south side of Narberth, right? So you have a whole community that lives on the south side of Narberth that can easily walk to this park without going under the tunnel. So I think we need to kind of keep that in mind too, that it's not just getting from the north to it, but it also connects into other neighborhoods.
When you talk about 8 acres of parkland, does that include Sabine Park?
It does, yes.
In the 8 acres?
Yeah.
Because we have to say we're really disappointed that Sabine Park is not in the park study.
So that is not because it wasn't considered important. It was actually recommended by the funding agency that that the borough wait to look at a separate plan just for Sabine.
So
because of the timing of the funding for this plan, there were too many unknowns about Sabine that it was recommended you wait and dedicate its own study to that park alone.
So when this study was funded, there was like $9,000 that was set aside for the study of Sabine. Is that still set aside for the study of Sabine?
Is there anyone from the township that can speak to that? We can find out. We'll find out and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Oh, Bill might have a little insight to that.
Yeah, the original grant was, application was for 4 parks, which was a very small application for four parks. When Sabine Park was taken out of this project, the balance was put to the other parks, and you can see it was needed to go into the detail for the other 3. So it was the same amount that went for 3 for the original grant. It was a 50-50 match.
We're going to go now, I think, to the online questions. One quick reminder, Sarah spent a good amount of time about the connectivity part. You know, we're proposing or recommending maybe a consideration of a reverse route on Haverford with another way out on Windsor. We're looking at different things for parking. That tunnel, there are some options to do, as hard as they are. But we were asked by several people who were part of the key person interviews that this report recommend strongly that the borough consider a traffic study that really looks at those things that affect all 3 of those parks. So that will definitely be part of what we're saying here. What that looks like under the tunnel, so I just wanted you to know that we heard that very loudly and clearly from many of the people, that getting to them is so difficult in many ways. So let's go to the online.
And that's actually a great transition into this comment from Colleen Johns, who is joining us online. And I just want to say to all of our online attendees, I see a couple of hands up. We don't have the ability to project your voice, so if you could please type any comments or questions in this Q&A chat thread, that would be great. So the first comment was from Colleen. She says, we are Narberth residents and we live on East Wynwood Road. We've lived here for 14 years. Our children grew up walking along East Wynwood Road to enter the park through the tunnel. It is not a safe walk. we always felt somewhat excluded from the borough. The proposal to widen the sidewalk and include trees along the outer edge would give a better sense of community, a safer walkway, etc. Thank you. One more. So, let's see, I thought I saw, okay, so we got I did open up the chat. Okay, there was a question from Richard Zeller. Was there any consideration for a dog park for a portion of Elmwood?
So we did kind of talk about the idea of dog parks at the last committee meeting because that had kind of started to come up in the survey. So dog parks actually have design standards, and the recommended size for a dog park is, the minimum size is 2 to 3 acres. So when you're talking about 2 to 3 acres for a dog park, you're talking about, let's just use the 2 acre example. You're talking about 1.5 acres for large dogs and 0.5 acre for small dogs. So that becomes a fenced in area, and when you have that small of a dog park, it becomes very muddy very quickly. Because there's no, just like we were talking about the wear and tear on a sports field, dog parks experience extreme wear and tear. So we would never recommend building a minimum dog park if you anticipate a lot of users within the dog park. So again, we're talking about 1.25 acres for this park alone at Elm Grove. So that doesn't even meet the minimum standards for a dog park. So that is why we're not recommending a dog park in this area. In terms of looking at Narberth, again, are we willing to give away half of the park to a dog park? I don't think that's where the community is looking to invest in recreation. So as much as I'm a dog owner and I love dog parks and I do advocate for them because I think it is a great way to build community and to provide amenities for a part of our population that often isn't provided for, I don't think the resources that you have here support the development of dog park.
Still on Elm Grove. Anybody here left in the audience that would like to comment on Elm Grove?
Maybe one last comment on Elm Grove, and then we'll move on. Okay. How about just a quick show of hands? Does anybody want to comment on Town Square, or is everyone waiting to comment on? Okay, so we will go to Town Square, and we'll try to. Okay.
So if you have Haverford Avenue going up toward Montgomery Avenue as a one-way, would you have it one-way all? Sure. Would it be all the way one-way up to Montgomery Avenue?
So that's where traffic study would have to get involved, right? So, and I don't want to flip all the way back to the circulation map so that we can look that far out. And I don't know, Bill, if you've thought a little bit more about the one-way pair, but the idea is that maybe just a section of those 2 roads would be one-way, and then eventually it would open up to 2-way. Where that would best be, I don't think it's all the way out to Montgomery Ave by any means. Maybe, what's the bridge?
Good question, but the simplest answer is that with the amount of cartway that you have from curb to curb, people want parking, people want to ride a bike across town, and people want to be able to drive. And those vehicles that have to use that cartway include the fire trucks, the biggest vehicles. So if you can share the road with bikes and vehicles, and Haverford travels east, and Wynwood travels west, that's called a one-way pair. Sorry, Windsor, sorry. Windsor travels west, it's called a one-way pair, and it circles. And then you use the side streets to circle and create smaller circles. Now, as Sarah said, that's a concept that's been studied. It hasn't been studied before, but it's been brought up before in the borough. And what we're going to recommend is that a traffic study be done, where you bring in the engineers and they design a strategy based on your geometry of the available rights of way that you have.
And volume. Yeah, so the geometry and the volume of how we have to move people through. So they would look at both of those components to make sure it functions. So I want to go to the gentleman in the blue.
Here we go.
My name's Ed Ginn, I'm a resident for 40 years. how many total parking spaces would be lost between what you're going to do with the one-way streets at the park and what you're planning on doing in the borough itself?
So the advantage of the one-way streets at the park would actually allow us to add parking in and around the park. So with the improvements to the parking lot, we lose some parking in the parking lot because we're picking up the planting islands and the ability to have shade trees and kind of stormwater BMPs. But then if you go to the one-way pairs and a shared road and not a separate bike lane, we actually could pick up parking, parallel parking along that area. Because you lose the need to have to widen the intersection as you approach the tunnel. That can just be a single lane coming in because you no longer need the turning lanes. So you can take parallel parking further down.
But wouldn't this all, like, if you do the traffic study and the traffic study doesn't work, this is all for naught, right?
Yeah, and that's why at this point it's just an idea.
Right.
It's not, we haven't devoted extensive time to determine the number of parking spots, the number of everything, because it's just an idea that has value and we think is worth further exploration.
So, yeah, my last comment is most people.
Well,
Go ahead.
you're right on about trying to add up the parking spaces. But for this project, this is a park planning. It's not a traffic planning. And so we looked at very local areas of the parking. We didn't count up total parking on Haverford. We said, what might happen if we did this configuration at Station Square? We said, what might happen if we do this configuration at Narberth Park? But we didn't do a total.
But you would never let a developer not give you a parking. Like, you have to know that.
And that's the province of the traffic engineer.
Okay.
Just to acknowledge, like obviously we are losing parking in here. If you were able to remove the bike lane, it allows for there to be maybe exploring options of parking on both sides.
So related to this conversation, Richard Zeller online said, I love the idea of square without parking, but what's the strategy for developing the parking required to attract viable retail?
And we don't have an answer for that today. And that's something that I think is on everybody's mind. And like Bill said, it's kind of outside the purview of this study because we're focused on recreation there. But it is by no means a conversation that we're saying has come to an end. We see that it needs to continue.
So Jenna Millman, a borough resident.
Hold on, sorry.
Sure.
Jenna Millman, I'm a borough resident. To that end, in terms of the decision-making process for Station Circle, is that something, and I know that you mentioned earlier that there's a vote in January about these plans. So is it anticipated that before January, the borough would undertake a traffic study for something like this or a parking study? Or is it anticipated that that wouldn't come until after that decision has to be made as to whether to proceed with this plan?
Yeah, so maybe taking a step back. So what we're doing here is called a master plan. When a borough or a township or any municipality approves a master plan, it does not obligate them to proceed with it. What it is saying, it's saying, here's a vision that is supported by the community, and we want to move forward, and it gives us a clear way to approach funding partners to say, this is our community vision, and it gives us a clear way to address other issues like parking, like we have to do a traffic study. It gives us an amount of what that might cost so that we can pursue it and fund it. So it doesn't mean by approving this plan that this is what's going to be built in any of these cases. It gives you the opportunity to pursue funding from public sector, from the state, from the federal government, and to start to implement actual engineered drawings for maybe phases of each of these projects. None of these projects are all going to happen at once. Each of them are going to be a phased project. So when we get to the draft plan, we'll have cost, we'll have phasing recommendations, and give kind of an implementation plan of how you start to get to these. Does that?
So this comment is from from Lay
And then we'll.
Hackinson. And it's more geared towards Elm Grove Park, circling back, but it's actually related to this conversation about traffic study versus master planning for the park sites. So Lee says, to be clear, and circling back to Elm Grove Park, we are not addressing the tunnel and safety concerns. Is that correct? I want to understand if this is truly open space that serves the community of Narberth. Is this just accessible to South Narberth? It needs to be, or if this is just accessible to South Narberth, it needs to be clearly stated, as this does not align with your mission as stated.
So I think, that's a very true statement. That tunnel does not belong to the borough. It belongs to Amtrak. It's in Amtrak's right away, right? It's not like you can just widen the tunnel. That doesn't happen. You could build a new tunnel next to it that allows for pedestrians. That is, again, doesn't just happen. You have to have buy-in from Amtrak for that. You have to have funding, probably at a federal level, which are very hard to get. So we're not saying, no, the tunnel's never going to be improved, but we're saying you have to be really creative about how you look at how you get people across there safely. And that would involve a traffic study. The most viable method that we have thought about, not being traffic engineers, is that you only allow one direction of vehicular traffic to go through at a time. So that means you have a traffic light on both ends of the tunnel, one-way traffic, and then you widen the pedestrian walkway to 10 feet. And so that would be maybe the most viable way to move forward, but we're not traffic engineers. That requires a traffic engineer study. But in terms of a cost-effective solution, that is what we've been able to kind of brainstorm. I'm trying to think, I don't think we've heard from either of you, so we'll go to you. Oh, sorry. Right there.
Hi, I'm Mary Kay Clark. I own a business, The Hairworks on Forest Avenue, for 40 years next year. For all of those 40 years, parking has been on the top of the agenda, trying to figure out how to fix it. I do not personally feel that renovating the Station Circle is advantageous to the businesses in the downtown. Reducing any parking of what is left from things that have been happening the last 4 or 5 years is not conducive for inviting people into the downtown that actually do have to drive.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be naive that the only people that shop in Narberth live in Narberth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not true. So those people that drive to Narberth need a place to park. And people like easy. If they can't get in and out easy, find a parking spot easy, they're just gonna keep going down the road. And that's a shame. Because Narberth is a great little town. But sometimes the businesses don't feel like they're being supported.
Thank you. It's good to hear that. Well, not good to hear that, but thank you for sharing that comment. I think in the very back, well, yeah, both of you had hands up at the same time.
I'll just be really quick. I actually agree about the parking. Like, I feel like taking away that easy parking, because I don't think, do we know what's going to happen behind McShay's? Because doesn't someone own that? So that parking could go away if they do some renovations. And then I just heard that the bank building is going to be renovated, so I think that bank parking lot is going away also. That's what I heard. So I don't see how you could have this. It does sound amazing, but I just don't know how you could do it without parking. And then the other thing I want to say real quick is the tunnel, because I've heard you say that thing before about the, signals one way. So I live on the south side. I'm a Narberth resident, and during any sort of rush hour, so in the morning, when school gets out around 3 and then again around 5, it is backed up as it is two-way. There's no way you can have a one-way signal there, in my opinion.
I think in the very back we've had hands up for a while, and then we'll come up front.
Hi, my name is Katie Skeen. I've lived in the borough for almost 20 years. I something like that. And I just had like another comment thinking about the tunnel. I live on the north side. I live on Hampton. And, you know, I often go to the south side of Narberth for various reasons. I never have gone through that tunnel, ever. Like, I always go over the Yoder Bridge. So I wonder if you all have thought about how the access, like a lot of people might be coming to Elm Grove Park from that bridge, so keeping, and that's a project that's happening, and I want people to think about continuing to make that bridge very pedestrian and bike friendly, because that's how I would be going to the south side of Narberth and enjoying Elm Grove Park or whatever. I would be doing that route. Yeah, I don't drive. I'm talking about walking and biking to Elm Grove. Because we're talking about the tunnel and the safety for pedestrians. No, I'm talking about, I thought we were talking about pedestrians in the tunnel. So I'm just saying that that bridge is very important. It's a very important route. I'm just going to say on parking, I mean, I welcome doing this. I welcome making more people-centered spaces, because studies, experiments, evidence all show that when you have more people-centered places, retail shopping actually goes up. So,
thank you. In the very front here, and then there might have been a gentleman who, do you still have a comment? Okay, we'll come back to you.
My name is Louise Giuliano, and I've lived here for 45 years on the north side. I was in town today, and several people who own shops asked me to come to this meeting to say just what this woman said. I mean, we have shops here that are not, well, except for the new ice cream store, that are not, you know, national shops that just have a little place here. These are individually owned places, and once again, and I've heard this for years, parking is terrible. And if we, I'm sorry, I think that's very charming, but if we don't allow people to come into this town to enjoy our shops, have dinner, do those things, then we have really made a big mistake. Plus now we have so many more people living here, and I don't know where they're going to put their cars. So I promised them I would do this, and I'm here just to represent them.
Okay, I think we had one more comment in the back, and then I do want to move, because we have some very excited people, I think, to talk about Narberth Park, so I want to make sure we save time for that.
I'm a Narberth business owner for over 30 years. My name's Drew Johnson. I'm kind of going on the same theme as other speakers at the park. Plan calls for eliminating parking in the circle, from what I understand. Will it be replaced? It will be replaced. It does not seem that it will be. How will this affect current and future of the business district? We don't know that till it happens. Different attitude. But if you start losing stores now because of this, you have to replace them. If you lose something like the State Store, which is an anchor store, because they don't have parking, that affects the rest of the business district. There's two spots in our town that attract people, the post office and the State Store. People actually get in their cars and drive it. And that would make the mix of the business district more palatable to everybody else. So is there any way to work an alternative to losing all the parking? Is one of the questions when you work your plan. And what I can see here, this is a lovely plan. But if you're going to have a business district that works, this plan doesn't work for us. So, you know, if you're going to do this, you're going to say to us, well, we really don't need you.
No, I think we're hearing everybody on that, and we definitely will look to the committee to discuss this topic a little bit more, because you're right, it is very important.
Just to set the stage, I was just counting from the analysis maps, you know, 25 existing parking spots within the study area that we're showing here.
Right. Yes, that counts parking behind the building. So I think within the circle itself, are there 15, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, so maybe what we're tasked with doing. Yeah, so maybe what we're tasked with doing is figuring out where do we pick up those 15 spots. If this is what the community wants to see, is there a way to get this and still maintain 15 spots in the core of downtown? So,
If you lose those parking spots there, I think the state store moves the local shopping center.
okay, understood. So he was saying if you were to lose those 15 spots, then the state store would move to the local shopping center.
We're gonna go to,
So,
we're gonna go to the Winwood shopping
yeah.
center or something and drive up.
So I think we all appreciate and understand the comments we've heard tonight about parking. I know you have council members here that are listening to these comments, committee members are listening to these comments, so we definitely understand the gravity of the issue and want to make sure we reflect a plan that meets both the needs of the businesses and the community moving forward.
I do have one more question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So, if we're losing the spots in the circle, where are people going to pick up their family from the train?
So the idea is you would have a drop-off in this area.
On the train side, not in front of the businesses?
Yes, on the train side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was my understanding, someone had said that it was going to be in front of all those businesses on Haverford Avenue.
So that's where if you reverse the direction of Haverford Avenue, you pick up the ability to have the drop-off on the train side.
Is there enough room to do that?
It could easily be accommodated, yes. Okay. Okay, so we have one last comment on Town Square.
Hi, my name is Peggy Nolan. I lived in Marlboro for 24 years. I live on the south side, and I just wanted to, I don't want to harp on the traffic study thing, but from someone who lives near the bridge that has been out for years and years and years and years because of Amtrak and SEPTA, just the idea of even making Haverford a one-way the other way. There's a SEPTA bus that goes down that street. So getting, just thinking about that, you're getting SEPTA, involved in the traffic study, or you're gonna now have a bus going or diverting all this traffic going down these tiny, tiny little side streets that have parking on both sides. You can barely fit one car down, never mind, two. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. I know we just keep reverting, we need a traffic study, but it is really an issue when you're getting Amtrak and SEPTA involved, because it will bring everything to a standstill, as we can see with that bridge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on to Narberth. It doesn't mean that we don't want to continue to hear comments about the other issues, so please use that feedback form and share any additional comments. I see a very excited hand in the back of the room here. It's waited very long.
Get some major points.
Hi, I'm Harry Quaid. I live on South Lower Avenue. Thank you for giving the mic because I have to go home and do homework. Along with a lot of other kids who are here supporting the skate park that had to leave early. Anyway, I just want to say that on behalf of the skaters and just people who use the skate park and just like it, I think the second design with the skate park included is, of course, the preferred option of me, and I think many others would agree. And I just think it would be a tragedy if we lost the skate park that all of the community has worked so hard to get, and I think it really provides a space for people who maybe don't align, especially kids who don't align with a traditional sport. Like I know, for one, I've definitely experienced that. Maybe I wasn't good at baseball or basketball, but hey, here's skateboarding. That's something I'm good at. That's something I like. And I just think that there should be a space for kids like me to come do that.
Thank you. That's a really great comment. And that's one of the reasons why we love skate parks. So, and please tell your friends who had to leave early that they can do the feedback form, because we do want to hear all your feedback. I think in the hat here we have a comment.
Okay, my name is Layla. I've been a resident of Marlborough forever, and I have 2 questions about the skate park.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm going to make it quick because I also had to do that to study for a quiz. You said this skate park was going to be raised, correct?
That was the idea,
And
just conceptually.
I have 2 questions based off of that. So currently there is a flooding issue at the current skate park, and even though it's raised, I'm wondering how drainage is going to work. I don't want still water just collected at the top like that. See if there's any passageways down below that will connect to drainage or grades and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know if you were here at the very beginning of the presentation, we talked about how this site actually sits in the lowest point of the township. And historically this would have been a wetland. It was a wetland, it was a lake at one point, the whole park. So yes, we definitely want to think about drainage. I know as talking with skateboard communities, the worst thing possible is getting your deck wet. So we do want to make sure that we think about that. So yeah, part of that consideration would be when we elevate it, can we help with stormwater management to make sure that drains quickly?
And then second question will be really quick again. You said the stairs. I'm wondering what's the width of those stairs, because I don't want the entire stairs to just be basketball spectators. I want to be able to go in and out
Yeah.
without like.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is a very schematic layout. Like we just kind of stole a different park and said, what does it kind of look like? What type of structures do you get in this space? But the idea is just a very, like this whole area is more of a passageway where maybe you have some streetscape elements. You don't have so much vertical element. But, you know, the stairs would just be along this edge right here, and then this kind of curved area here would be another kind of set of stairs. So those are more geared at kind of walking up them, less skating them, where like any sort of banked stairs, things like that would be more in this area that would be more skatable, or like maybe there's a 10-step in here that brings you up to here. So kind of looking at that place where you kind of have gathering spaces, but then you also have skating spaces, having them mixed together a little bit.
Do you have dimensions in mind?
I would have to take a dimension off the board over here to kind of show you what we laid out here. But again, this is by no means meant to be a final design, just an idea of how we want to make sure we accommodate seating, shade, and other amenities that you kind of want in a skate park, but maybe you don't have today. So, can we maybe, okay, I did see his hand first, so we're going to take his comment and then we'll hop over to the side of the room.
My name's Carlo, and I am a borough resident, and if the second concept were to happen, obviously you have the stage like incorporated with the library as like a performance area, but I was just wondering what would happen to the gazebo or the pavilion.
Yeah, are you a Boy Scout too? Did you work on the pavilion? Okay, because I know a lot of Boy Scouts have done work on that. So the idea is that that gazebo would be kind of, the use of that would be incorporated into the new stage area. So the gazebo itself would no longer exist.
Okay.
So we're kind of relocating that use into a new structure here.
Thank you.
Yeah. In the back, let's actually go to the gentleman in the gray shirt. I don't think we've heard from him tonight, and then we'll catch you two.
I have a couple questions on surfaces. Oh, my name's Billy Marsden. I'm a borough resident. I have a couple questions on surfaces in the park. So, am I seeing these plans correctly that you're planning on adding a second baseball field, and that will all be dirt?
Yeah, so there is an existing baseball field there that currently has a grass infield. So the idea of that is if you were to improve that field, that maybe you look at including a dirt infield that would give you the flexibility to accommodate both softball programs and baseball programs. Do you have a thought on that, or?
I do have a thought on that. Like the way I read these plans is, hey, let's expand sort of like the capacity for baseball in the park. And I think you mentioned at the very beginning of this that this space is amazing because people can play football there and they can play soccer there. And this feels like, hey, let's accommodate for other spaces on top of something that's very baseball centric. So that doesn't feel super accommodating to me in terms of other activities happening on that field.
Okay.
And then the second question I have is, what are you planning on the surface for the playground?
Yeah, the playground, so, we're showing that in the orange area would be some sort of safety surface. A lot of times we do recommend poured-in-place rubber surfacing. It's easily maintained from a liability point of view, but it's also easily traversed. It does have a higher price tag, so the alternative would be maybe start to look at some areas where you have the poured-in-place, but maybe you go to what they call natural fiber, so that's engineered wood fiber. that again has that fall capacity that we need in a modern playground. But it is still accessible, but it is a little harder to traverse, right? If you have a mobility issue, you're walking on, you know, a movable surface, and it does require maintenance. You have to go through and make sure that your swing areas haven't been depleted, things like that, or bottom slides. So there's ways to kind of look at the pricing of maybe under the swings we do pour in place, maybe in further out areas, maybe you do the engineered 5R, so that we can help with cost savings.
Perfect, thank you.
Let's go to the blue sweatshirt.
Jenna Millman again, piggybacking off of your question about the surface for the softball field. My concern there as one of the organizers of the 4th of July events is that that could become problematic for community events in that space in terms of the dirt and just, you know, becoming muddy, becoming problematic for any of those events that are out there. Plus, those fields are used for soccer and other sports that I think wouldn't be conducive in that space to having the dirt.
Yeah, so the soccer fields still lay out the way they are used without interacting with that infield. Currently, the football field does interact with the 90-foot baseball field. It would interact slightly with this infield as well, so there would be overlay of the football field on both. But no, that's a really valid consideration. And again, this is something that might be a low priority because currently there isn't a softball program in the borough. But one of the things we did hear during public feedback was, you know, a lot of the baseball programs are boy-centric or male-centric. So do we want to try to be a little more, look at both opportunities? But I think, you know, there are quick ball programs that are co-ed, the soccer is co-ed, there's other things. So I think there's ways to kind of look at, do we need a dirt softball infield? Yeah.
And my other point was with respect to the pickleball court idea, which I think is going to be transposed over one of the basketball courts.
Yeah, so we were showing it on this basketball court.
So just from a practicality standpoint, I don't know, I think it's a great idea. I don't know that people would actually be able to utilize it as a pickleball court because those courts are so actively used by basketball players that you may be putting money into something that people don't have the ability to use just because it's so busy over there in the times where people would also want to be using the pickleball courts.
Yeah, I think the thought is there that it is a very low cost improvement that could be done with a portable net, which is not astronomical. It's, you know, you can buy one for $200 if you're getting top of the line portable net. And then you're painting a few lines on the court, which is something your public work has the ability to do. So it's something that could be tried out. And the idea is that maybe it appeals to seniors that might be out there at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning when you don't necessarily have basketball happening at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Obviously, once school's out, yeah, we understand those basketball courts are being used until the lights are off, if not past. So I think it's a way to kind of explore how do we make sure those courts are being used during the day when maybe kids aren't out on it. All right. Red, yeah.
Again, the comment about the basketball and the pickleball courts, those basketball people are very hardcore. And there's lots of times when our neighborhood kids can't get on those courts because the visitor visitor adults are out playing there. So there needs to be dedicated tennis pickleball. Have that be a combined one, but I don't think it's a very good idea to expect that the basketball people will say, oh sure, we don't need to play basketball, you go play pickleball. Next question is the baseball field regulation size?
Which one, the 90
big
foot?
one. The big one.
So there is no regulation on an outfield, right? An outfield can be whatever it needs to be. I will say the reason why you have netting along the roads is because they are short outfields. So yes, the diamond itself is regulation. The area behind home plate meets regulation. The outfields are a little short.
Okay, so can the American Legion League play there?
Oh yeah, no, they are actively playing there.
Okay, that is fine.
And they are happy with the dimensions of the field.
All right, and the question is, what's the cost of Concept 2?
So we're still in the identifying what you guys like phase.
Okay.
The next phase, so once we have a clear direction of which concept we're looking at, then we start to put cost to it. We come up with a funding kind of strategy and an implementation strategy. So that, again, there's no way this is all gonna be built at once. It's not gonna be a small price tag for the whole park.
Is this like a 10-year plan?
Most likely, yes. It might be a little further than that. But yeah, that's typically, we're looking at 10 to 20 years to implement a community park. I mean, this is a community park that has a lot of existing infrastructure that you don't want to just build the whole park at once. It's not like you're going to take the park offline for 18 months while you build everything over again. So, you know, there might be certain things that happen in stages, like maybe you start with the playground. Maybe that's a priority to the community, really updating that playground. Maybe you start with improving the parking lot and getting walkways in. Maybe we start with the walkway around the park. So I think there's a lot of different things that as we kind of go at the draft plan and we look at the costs, we can start to say, this is a good low-hanging fruit priority. Let's tackle this one and get some improvements in. Or maybe there's a big picture priority we want to look at and really target funding agencies to get in a really big improvement that's critical to the borough.
Okay, but it is a long 10 to 20-year process to get this whole thing.
The whole thing, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a resident of Narberth for 21 years. I have two quick questions. Is the storage that's planned the same size as the storage we have right now?
Roughly, which we understand is not enough.
Yes.
So that's why we do kind of have that little extra building too as the possibility, and you know that there's room to expand that footprint, but just kind of showing the idea that maybe you have more than one storage location.
The 4th of July and the basketball. And basketball, I guess kind of two questions about basketball. I know that they have rented a trailer that they've put in the parking lot for during the summer when the basketball season is in session. So is that, like with this parking, is that something that you all thought about? Where they
That's new information we're learning tonight. So that's good to know. And maybe hopefully there's a way to accommodate their storage. I mean, I don't know if they're using, if they get a trailer because that's what they can get, or if they need the whole trailer. So
I'm not part of the basketball, but I'd say that they use the whole thing. Yeah, okay, yeah. And, yeah, for the scoreboards, signage. And also basketball, you said, I think, in both concepts, is one of the courts smaller?
So that's today how they are. It's just you don't read them as being that different size because it's all squared up, but those are the sizes that you currently have in the park today.
Okay.
So one is a full size and one is a junior high school size.
All right, thanks.
One quick
gentleman in the back here, and then we'll switch
Absolutely.
over to.
As I'm making my way there, I wanted to just kind of comment when we talked about real estate, so 6.25 acres, trying to accommodate the fields, which you see on the western side, and then we've got the eastern side. What I think becomes invisible is that walkway system, that wider pathways take up a lot of space, and when you look at those plans, your eyes aren't drawn to the walkways. But it kind of reflects a really important concept of what people have said in the survey about being able to meander safely, through the park and have places to walk. And I think that space that is part of the walkways gets lost a little bit. So I just sort of wanted to call to mind that does eat up a lot of space when you start to put it into modern design standards.
My name is Chris. I live in Iona. I'm in favor of Concept 2 because the skate park. Skateboarding is diverse, it builds community, it keeps people active, it's a place for kids to be kids, as you mentioned. The skate park right now is in terrible shape. The ground is terrible, the obstacles are nuts, but it's heavily used. There's kids there all the time. Getting rid of that would be a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that comment.
Yeah, let's go up front and then the gentleman in the back. And then we'll come back over to you if we don't have any other.
I just want to say that I know that there's a lot of people that support the skate park, but I actually am really disappointed that there's no tennis or pickleball, like tennis courts in the park designs at all. I feel like if 50% of the people wanted the tennis in the survey, it just got ignored. Because The skate park, the pilot happened during the pandemic. It just got pushed onto people. Not everyone was happy. In fact, the entire rec board resigned, except for Jim McNulty, over the fact that this got pushed onto our community. So, and I was on some of those rec board calls. I didn't think that you were on that yet.
No, I was. I just don't want the wrong information being put out.
Okay, well, many of the rec board resigned over
I
it.
did not resign.
Okay,
So it's on.
okay, it's on the record.
Thank you.
But I was on some of those rec board calls. I don't think you were on the rec board at that point, but we had talked about, because my neighbor's the one that got some of that, the free equipment, and it was intended to be at Sabine. And so the fact that it just got put onto the tennis courts is like, in my opinion, it's really disappointing that this just got like taken away. So you talk about like having activities for all ages. So I have my kids, and we use the park heavily as, you know, the playground and all that stuff, all those years walking to there. Then I had hoped in the next 15 years to walk with my husband, play tennis, meet some of my friends on the north side, and then we'd walk to the Greeks and get lunch. But that's not going to happen. Like, we won't have that activity to walk to. So I just think that, I just don't understand like why that decision got made without, I feel like, any input from half of the community.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we worked off of the information that we took in from the public meetings and from a lot of information. Tennis came up just recently at our last committee meeting. Prior to that, there hadn't been this strong voice for tennis. So, and I don't know if Nita, if you want to talk a little bit more to that?
Can I just make one comment to that? Is because we thought that all we had to do was fill out that survey and then you would see how many voices were talking about tennis. But it just seemed like it completely got ignored. So when we found out it wasn't even in any of the plans, then we started talking to the people that we knew, and that's why you got more feedback.
Okay.
So it's...
Yeah, and so we're still...
And I'm not anti-skate park,
Yeah.
but I always thought that like having it near the Wawa, up at Sabine, that would be like a really cool place for middle schoolers to hang out.
Okay.
And they can get there easier through Narberth on their skateboarding there than someone from the south side who has to walk who's in their 60s.
Okay, thank you. We did have a gentleman in the back that's had his hand up for a while. Anita in the back in the hat. Okay.
I'm Carlo again. I was just like, can you explain in the second concept, like, what's the shape of the playground next to that little blue patch? What is that?
You're talking about this area here?
Yeah.
So that's a multi-purpose play court. So it would have like a half basketball court for younger kids to play on. It has a 4-square court. The idea that maybe there's little blank canvases where people can do chalk art. So it's a place for kind of informal multi-court play for younger kids that can't get on the big basketball court.
So instead of the basketball court that's currently...
Yeah, instead of the one that's over here. So like in concept 1, we show that one over here a little bit changed in size. And then in concept 2, we show it over here and we show the swings over here.
All right, thank you.
So we did have the gentleman in the back have his hand up for a long time. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Kuhar. I live right across the street at 2 Narberth, borough resident. First, I want to say thank you to everybody who's been a part of pulling this together. I know it's very difficult to try to listen to everybody and have their vision and it's a lot of different people who live in Narberth, a lot of different interests, a lot of different hobbies, different ages. And I think you did a great job of just trying to assemble all of this into something that reflects our values and we can all rally behind. So thank you and kudos to the team. That's it. I hate it all. I want to change. You messed this part up. There's not enough parking. I kid. Seriously though, one question was, did you think about, as far as the skate park, it seems to be a lot of pro, a lot of just voices, feeling that they haven't been heard as far as the tennis and pickleball. Have you thought about, I really like the idea of a plaza and the example of Paynes Park that you guys brought up, and how it's multifunctional. Have you looked at the town square area, the station square, as a possibility of maybe developing some space there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an option that could be explored. I think it would be even tougher after the feedback we've heard tonight. I think, there's something to be said with, are there things that can't happen here that maybe could happen in Sabine? I think that was brought up tonight, and that's definitely something that we need to consider as we go into the final draft plan recommendation. I think you made a very valid point about being able to walk to a tennis court as being valuable. I think we also have to weigh what are the regional facilities. Are there a lot of tennis courts within the Narberth area that people, maybe you can't walk to them, but they are within a quick drive from your home? So we do kind of have to look at all those different pieces in terms of when we look at one park, what do we fit in it? So.
Yeah, and being across the street too, and I do want to say, I've heard, I'm not sure who spoke about the feeling of how the Skate Nard Park and the pilot kind of came about during the pilot, and there's maybe some bad feelings there.
Yeah.
Totally understand that, and kind of wanted to say that as a skateboarder, I see both sides. I grew up skateboarding and can definitely relate to some of the younger kids here who feel like, hey, there's a space for me. I will say, being somebody who is now older and has kids and also has to get up early for work and lots of other real world issues, that unfortunately that space is being abused, that the hours and kids aren't just being there and using the space as it should be. There's a lot of late night, there's a lot of beer cans out front. Not saying it's the skateboarders either, it's just them. But they do need a space. They need a space that they can aggregate, hang out, be safe, feel like they're being represented and seen and have a space for them. I just don't know if it's dead center in the middle of Narberth Park. And that being said, I think we owe it to them that if we take that away, because it is there and they do have something that's of value and important, that we need to find somewhere for them, that's a space for them that is what they want, and again, around that plaza idea, things, again, growing up skating, things that were my favorite spots were places that were like Wolf Park, that were meant for, they're not meant for a designed skate park, So just wanted to reflect that and just say that I appreciate you guys and your attempt to kind of bridge all of this for us. So thanks.
Thank you.
Well, as a backstory about the skate park at Sabine Park, when this was first, I go to all the council, many of the council meetings, it was thought that it was so remote that there would be the problems that you just said, and having it down by the police station. Now, with that being said, I think tennis courts are a valuable part to the other generation. Kids need a place to go, but we need a place to go too. I want to go play tennis.
And I would like to point out that.
Sorry, one second. The gentleman behind you has had his hand up for a while.
Dennis Brogan, I live on Dudley Avenue. I'm in this committee. I want to clarify one thing. You said that the tennis courts were just kind of brought up at the last meeting. I've been, at least from the very beginning, mentioning the tennis courts as something to be considered. I think you've done great work in trying to meld all of the concepts together. I think the kids need a place to skate. I think that's true. I think the driving force, without any doubt, has been Lower Merion Township and their refusal to do what they know they need to do. They put money on the table to Narberth, so everybody should know, for Narberth to build a skate park in what is the most busy regional park in the area, the smallest park at 6.5 acres. Lower Merion, in the area, when you say, well, seniors can walk in the area, well, the kids can too. And there are, Narberth has 40 parks. Lower Merion has 44 parks. Only one, and that's Kinwood Trail, can you use a skateboard. And they say, we've spent 3 years and we can't find a place to put a skate park. Well, there were signs up on Belmont Avenue or Belmont Hill saying, no skate park here. The reason they don't have a skate park, because they've also told us, if you don't build it as big as we want, we're going to take our money elsewhere. So that tells me they can build one, but they don't have the political will to build one, and they have enough money that say, hey, let's give it to Narberth, they can use it, they'll do it, and that will pat them on the head. So that's an important thing to know, that there was money that an organization was putting together to try to resurface the tennis courts, but the borough, which is strapped for money, wasn't able to contribute. So let's have a pilot program, put these skateboards on there. I think they could have a park, should have a park. I don't think this is the right spot. Maybe for a size of 8,000, 8,000, it would be fine. But what you see there now, when you are heard, well, they're using it all the time. I've been going down there regularly. What you have are little kids on scooters and their parents in there now, kids on bikes. And one of the comments even said it well, which was, you know, my son used to, when they first started it, like skateboarding, but now it's just taken over by the little kids on their scooters. So it isn't, and I can go on as I will when we have our meeting and go over things, but I wanted to clarify the tennis court issue has been raised.
Yeah, and just to clear my statement, like, obviously we've talked about it at the committee level. We had a strong public presence come out to our last committee meeting to talk about tennis. So yes, we've definitely talked about it at the committee level. It was more public input hadn't been strongly expressed. And we are hearing it now. And just as a quick question, quick show of hands, if there was a single tennis court as opposed to two, would people feel like that was valuable? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Is there anyone we haven't heard from tonight? We are approaching 9:30. I believe we have not heard from you.
Hi, my name is Lucas Drexage. I'm a near, live within walking and biking distance of the park. I just wanted to amplify the last comment. My sons are 7 and 4. We regularly visit the skate park. I have the brace to prove it. I'm an avid tennis player. Would love to play other sports as well, but the park's incredibly important to us. We make regular use of the skate park along with our neighbors, our friends. My 2 boys go to Marion Elementary. We have play dates at that space and the playground. And they play soccer on the fields and everything else. Absolutely, well, in support of that concept over the other one. And also understand that there's lots of concepts that maybe couldn't make their way. But
Well, it's not to say that one of these are going to be the final concept either. You know, these are ways of exploring ideas, and based off what we hear tonight, there might be refinements to one of these comments that includes what we're hearing tonight. So,
and my last comment is I appreciate how many people here are taking care of their neighbors. It's also disappointing to see how many neighbors are concerned with singular needs. It's disappointing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think let's just quick hop online. I know we have a few comments that people have been
waiting to share.
All right, so we have a couple I'll start with a comment first and then we have a question. These came in earlier in the conversation but are still relevant. So Sean says, I was raised in Narberth and I've recently moved back as a resident. I remember when the unofficial town skate park was the train station parking lot and the tennis courts were occupied by the same 4 retired dads every day. Since moving back, I've been curious about the new skate park and I've walked by a few times to see how people are or are not using it, and every time, without exception, I've seen groups of kids playing, having fun, and making friends. Just yesterday, there were 9 kids across several age groups, genders, and races enjoying each other's company in a unique outdoor space. Since moving back to town, nothing has looked more like Narberth summers I remember from my childhood than the kids at that skate park. I would like this comment to simply be on the record in strong support of retaining the park. The world offers fewer and fewer outdoor spaces for kids to spend unscheduled time with their friends, let alone opportunities to make new ones. Prioritizing that is a very Narberth way to be. So then we have a question from Lee. Can we be assured that there will be no future fees put on the Athletic Association and other athletic groups using the park for sports? Are we moving towards things being fee-based to pay for this, like in Lower Marion? How much of the allocated money or budget has been spent on the Master Parks plan thus far? Can we please include some numbers on these slides?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't recall the total grant funding? Bill, do you recall the total funding for the plan? Yeah, so 80, so that would have been a 50-50 match. They got 40,000 from the state. I don't know if there were any other matching funds.
No, it was higher than that. It was 67,000 from DCNR.
Okay.
And there was also 10,000 from.
Okay, so the townships put probably about 10,000 into it then, and everything else was a grant? Is that fair? Okay, thank you for clarifying that. In terms of future funding, the goal would be to leverage public grant opportunities with maybe some township funds. There might be opportunities where maybe there's private funding, or there might be partnerships for funding. One was brought up tonight with Lower Marion might have a potential partnership for funding. So kind of leveraging public grant funds with maybe some township funds. I don't think anyone at this point is thinking about fees for recreation. We haven't discussed that to this point, so I don't think that's on the forefront of anyone's mind. It obviously is something that could be explored, but it's not a direction we've gone to today.
Sarah, just to make a difference between capital and operating funds, the capital funds is where you can get grants. Operating funds, almost never.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna just say we're gonna kind of try to wrap up in 5 minutes. I see 2 hands this went up, 3 hands. So if we can just maybe these last 3 questions, just in respect of everyone's time.
Yep. So I know that this meeting is not about Sabine, but I know a lot of people have said that the two are linked. Particularly, I think the most contentious use of space is this skate park, tennis courts, that gazebo area. And so I think perhaps for that chunk of it, there's a worthwhile piece of waiting to link those 2 plans so that you're not jumping ahead and saying, this is our only chance, we need to put the skate park here as part of this master plan, or we need to do the tennis courts here as part of this master plan, whatever it is, when you've got this whole other park. And so as part of the master plan approval process and what that looks like, I guess maybe leaving some ambiguity there as it ties together with Sabine, so that we only have what, you said 8.32 acres, and so cramming something in where maybe it doesn't belong, where there's another few acres, I think doesn't make as much sense.
Thank you.
And coordinate.
I just wanted to echo Jeremy's thought. Like, there's a lot of work, and clearly you did a lot of listening since the tot lot wasn't there at the meeting in September. I think you guys added that when you listened to.
Oh, we never took away it. It was just shown as one area versus
Okay.
2 areas, things like that, different concepts.
My biggest concern though, right, 10, 20 years, we're talking about a 10 or 20 year plan is, and this is maybe just a comment for the borough, is to really consider what we do in the next 10 years and how we maintain the park. I live across the street. I think I literally moved here for the fact that my kids could walk to school and go to this park every day. We used it as our backyard during COVID. So as we continue through this process, maybe just really think about what we can do to maintain what we have until this euphoria of a park continues, because it's going to be great. It's not going to be not everyone's going to get everything. And I'm a tennis player, so I would vote tennis. But besides that, I would just say, like, I think as a community, if we can really also focus on how we spend the next 10 or 20 years till we get there, listening to our businesses and listening to our neighbors, I think would be really important.
Great, thank you. And I think there was one final hand up that I saw. Yes, right in front of you.
I think the maintenance of whatever they do is critical. I remember, I've lived here long enough when they put the tennis courts in. They were beautiful, they were used, and then they stopped maintaining them. And then the kids started riding their bikes around them. I remember taking the net down so the kids could ride their bikes, so that it was a safety issue. But I think Narberth gets away on the cheap. They don't maintain things. Once. And that's where, yeah. And they never maintained them. And it's the same thing with the parking downtown. If you go to communities like Morristown, New Jersey, Hatboro, those boroughs and those municipalities make commitments to buying properties. They would be buying the Mellon Bank building to have parking. they wouldn't be sitting there letting that be developed as, another 20 apartment units and saying that the people that live there aren't going to have cars. The borough should go in and buy the Mellon Bank building.
Sorry. I mean, honestly, we appreciate that comment. It's definitely outside of the scope of what we're doing here tonight.
But it is.
It is
doing
and it isn't.
everything you're doing without taking care of parking.
Yeah.
It's a waste.
And that's great, and this is all great.
Yeah.
However, you're comparing apples and oranges, sir. I respect your opinion. Everyone can hear me with that mic. I respect your opinion, but they have large commercial tax bases. You compare us to Morristown and Hatboro, who have significant commercial tax bases. Look around us. We're limited in our commercial tax bases. So that's not a good, that's not a good comparison.
We now have $1 million homes. We probably have better.
That doesn't.
The tax bases have.
They have commercial districts and quarters that we don't. And just because a house costs $1 million doesn't mean it can suddenly make our funds go up significantly.
What would it cost the borough to purchase? It's not where the apartment.
This isn't a debate. This isn't a debate. I'm just trying to give people some perspective that we don't have a commercial tax base, but we would love to have one.
We have a tax base.
Okay,
Folks, we're going to wrap it up.
Name one national chain that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.